15 sides of beef, 1 plate of assorted cheeses.
Wow. Guy loses 100 pounds and he just turns on his own kind.
If it was my profession, if it was my job, listen, I'm not fat shaming him, but you got a responsibility.
Absolutely are.
No,
15 sides of beef.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
Each week, we take a look back in time, decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie takes to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV. We review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, if you would like to hang out with us live, we are on YouTube. Just go to the Shat the Movies YouTube channel. There we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are you reviewing tonight?
So, Gene, when our wonderful listeners write in to commission a film, they go in the order that they were commissioned, unless there's something very special, which does not go on our normal, like Wednesday, Tuesday release day. So over a year ago, one of our great listeners, Amy, wrote in and said, I would love you to do this film. It just happens to fall, the release date, on the 44th anniversary of the original release of this film. It is a classic. But it also has a lot in common with one of our movies we've done recently, Gene, Highlander Part 2. Yep, they were both shot in difficult locations. Lots of drug use on set by the cast and crew. There was an older star who refused to show up on time, only wanted to work 3 weeks for $3 million. There was civil unrest in the country they were shooting, guerrillas. There was a funding problem for the film. There was cheap, untrained labor who was working behind the scenes. There was actors who actually wanted to leave the set. There was a continuous plot rewrite. One turned out to be the worst sequel of all time, and one of them turned out to be a classic that's won multiple Academy Awards and is being celebrated today on its 44th anniversary. The Francis Ford Coppola American epic war classic, Apocalypse Now.
And April in Friendswood, Texas wrote in and said, hello, Shat crew. I've been a fan for a long time now. I started listening with the first Game of Thrones episode and then went back and listened to everything in the Shat library. You're amazing together and I love you as a duo, but I really miss Ash, y'all. If you're listening, Ash, you are loved. When you can, please come back. As I explained in my commission email, I have a strong personal connection to Apocalypse Now. My father was a Vietnam vet, a U.S. Marine who landed in Da Nang in 1967 and was there for what I've been told was much longer than he should have been. Like so many others, he was pulled out but didn't adjust well, so he went back in several times. I don't know much else about his service. He didn't talk about it, and he died several years ago. He was not a happy or particularly stable man when he returned, understandably, and my mother and I don't have many pleasant memories of him. They divorced when I was young. My visits to my father were awkward. I didn't know him, and as I grew up, we had very little in common. But I loved him and very much wanted to be able to share something with him. We both loved movies and spent many hours watching VHS tapes and going to the small theater in the next town. Eventually, we got to experience the newly christened HBO. These movies are the few happy memories I have with my father, even though the films themselves are often very grim, and I cherish every moment. We watched Apocalypse Now together, along with several other favorites of his, many times. He told me once that he considered this movie and Full Metal Jacket to be the most accurate depiction of the enlisted man's experiences in the Vietnam conflict ever portrayed on film. Aside from my strong emotional response to the viewing experience, this movie is my all-time top film pick in every other way. It has topped my list for almost 40 years now, and I've yet to find another film that addresses such dark themes in so entertaining a fashion. The themes in Apocalypse Now are unquestionably disturbing, but then we also get phenomenal performances from the legendary cast, Brando's delivery of the horror, and the bleak poetry of T.S. Eliot, iconic dialogue, Duvall's I love the smell of napalm in the morning, and Charlie don't surf, cinematography and filmmaking at its absolute best. Plus, Playboy centerfolds and blowing shit up, always fun. The soundtrack is sometimes dissonant, but also somehow always exactly perfect for every scene. The Doors, the end for both the beginning and the end, the flight of the Valkyries during the aerial attack. That other guy they call Ebert said it better than I ever could. Apocalypse Now is one of the key films of the century and is the best Vietnam film, one of the greatest of all films, because it pushes beyond the others into the dark places of the soul. It is not about war so much as about how war reveals truths we would be happy never to discover. If we are lucky, we spend our lives in a fool's paradise, never knowing how close we skirt the abyss. This is a less than zero white movie for me. It's perfect, even in the ways it is imperfect. If it doesn't quite reach that epic level for you, I hope you at least enjoyed the show. Thank you for what you do. April R., now in Friendswood, Texas. Well, Apocalypse Now is a 1979 epic war film produced and directed by Francis Ford Coppola. The screenplay, co-written by Coppola, John Milius, and Michael Herr, is loosely based on the 1899 novella Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, with the setting changed from the late 19th century Congo to the Vietnam War. The film follows a river journey from South Vietnam into Cambodia undertaken by Captain Willard, played by Martin Sheen, who is on a secret mission to assassinate Colonel Kurtz, played by Marlon Brando, a renegade special forces officer who is accused of murder and presumed insane. The ensemble cast also features Robert Duvall, Frederick Forrest, Albert Hall, Sam Bottoms, Lawrence Fishburne, and Dennis Hopper. Apocalypse Now was honored with the Palme d'Or in the Cannes Film Festival, where it premiered unfinished. When it was finally released on August 15th, 1979 by United Artists, it performed well at the box office, grossing $40 million domestically and eventually over $100 million worldwide. The film was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Supporting Actor. It went on to win Best Cinematography and Best Sound. Apocalypse Now ranked 19th in Sight and Sound's Greatest Films poll in 2022, and in 2000, the film was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry by the U.S. Library of Congress as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Big D, I know we both have rich memories of this film and associate a lot with it, much like April. But as the veteran, I'll give you the honors of starting first. What are your memories of Apocalypse Now?
So it's no secret that I've loved action, war, fuck yeah movies growing up. The genre was everything that I wanted. And movies like Red Dawn, yes, a half-white movie, Delta Force, the Rambo series, those are right up my alley. But Apocalypse Now, it was something completely different. I was used to the over-the-top, the fucking gung-ho, the American hero, the juiced-up superhero who was supernatural, who was going to go out there and save the day. And me watching this as a younger teenager, I was not mentally prepared for what I saw. It was like a psychedelic adventure. Willard's taken upstream. He's going to hunt down Kurtz. I had a hard time understanding what was going on. I didn't understand the journey or the message that Coppola was sharing or the history of the Vietnam War. For me, it was a lot. It was a lot of weird situations, and I couldn't sit down for the 2+ hours required to watch it. Now, for this podcast and for April, you're getting a 2-for-1. I watched the full 2.5 of this. Then I sat down and watched the 1.5 hours of Hearts of Darkness, a documentary by Eleanor Coppola. I can confidently say now for the first time that I understand better Apocalypse Now, and it is a true miracle of filmmaking. The fact that this movie even exists and was completed is astounding.
For the audience at home, also, April has incredible mercy in that she recommended that we watch the theatrical cut and didn't want to put us through any of the other cuts, including the Redux and anything else longer, which the longest verges on 4 hours. So we did stick to the theatrical cut for this one. Big D, I mentioned before on the pod that Ron Howell, the teacher who convinced me to pursue a journalism career, was himself a Marine Corps correspondent in Vietnam. And he taught me all about the parts of Vietnam that you don't hear about on a superficial glance, like the war crossing borders into Cambodia and his work personally of working with the Montagnards. And part of my education was watching Apocalypse Now, which serendipitously coincided with studying Heart of Darkness in AP English at the same time in high school. So my first exposure to Apocalypse Now came with this deep understanding of the themes and the historical context. It really was the best time to learn about it. And maybe this makes me a nerd, but watching this movie reminded me of how much I miss spending hours a day just learning in school. I think you with the documentary are kind of in the same boat, but man, we didn't know how good we had it. Just hours and hours and hours of people just giving us information, teaching us new things. Kids, if you're listening, hug a teacher.
Yeah, I need to ask, was Mr. Howell, did he look like, hey, man, I told you far out, dude? Was he Dennis Hopper?
He kind of had, he was kind of white-haired guy. He had a beard. You could tell that he had sort of a hippie-ish cadence, but he also was a Marine. I mean, so he was a journalist covering the war for the Marine Corps. And so when he had to pick up a weapon, he still did. So he's not Dennis Hopper, but he's also certainly not Willard.
He was more a Full Metal Jacket.
Yes, much more Full Metal Jacket. But he did sprinkle in a lot of the dirtier facts about the war that we didn't quite realize. Even going back, as the Redux version of Apocalypse Now does, into how the French, failed there and how we just swooped right in and took over that same role. Well, we got a lot to say about this movie, April, and we're going to try to fit it all within an hour. And to do so, we should get straight to the trailer.
You've heard of Colonel Walter E. Kurtz? Your mission is to terminate the Colonel's command.
Terminate. Terminate with extreme prejudice.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Very obviously, he has gone insane.
This is the end, my only friend, the end.
Are you an assassin? I'm a soldier.
Come on! Yeah. All right. This is the end. My only friend, the end.
During the Vietnam War, U.S. Army Special Forces Colonel Walter E. Kurtz is waging a brutal guerrilla war without permission from his commanders. At an outpost in Cambodia, he commands American Montagnard troops who see him as a demigod. Burnt-out American operative Captain Benjamin L. Willard is summoned to Nha Trang and ordered to terminate Kurtz's command with extreme prejudice.
So, Gene, before I start talking about the film, I want to give a shout out to the Orange County Public Library again. They came through for me. Finding the theatrical version was nearly impossible. Why these studios can't get together and get their library of these? I mean, they're saving it for historical significance, Gene. Did I have to go to the Library of Congress to get a copy of this? No, I just went to my local public library. Everybody, support your local library.
And I want to give a shout out to Second Sale on eBay for sending me a copy of Apocalypse Now on DVD for the nice price of $5.38 with shipping included.
But Gene, it also, I ran into the old problem of the scratch disc.
Oh.
I had to research in the middle. You get some toothpaste, small circular swirls with a soft cloth. It will get them out. It still made my watching experience a little harder than it needed to be, but this film, I think, is worth it. And from the opening shot, this is not going to be the typical Hollywood movie. There's no gradual immersion into the Vietnam War. We're immediately disoriented. We get this distorted wobble sound of the helicopter blades. It's a close-up of the jungle. There's smoke. We see some helicopters, really close up, just parts of them flying by. Then there's a napalm explosion. All the jungle's on fire. There's smoke. And then we start getting Willard's narration. And Coppola goes crazy here. He starts overlaying his face upside down. It's looking like he's lost his mind. He's in the hotel room over the burning jungle. Now the helicopters are flying in. Their blades become the hotel room ceiling fans. The wobble of that intensifies. It is like an auditory, a visual stimulation. And then it's topped off by the doors. We start getting, this is the end. It's hypnotically playing in the background. And I've tripped many times. I loved mushrooms, acid. There was no hallucinogen I was not a close friend with in college. And I think as a film, yes, people talk Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. It's very trippy, the visuals. For me, this is the closest representation of what it's like to trip. You're introspective, your thoughts, you have an internal monologue. You're mixing up and disorienting visual images, and you're having random object association. To me, right off the bat, I'm like, holy shit, I just took a cap and a stem.
We talk a lot on the podcast about how important it is to do a fresh rewatch of the movie because you have your preconceived notion, love it or hate it, about a movie. And this rewatch was a great example of that because in my head, I remembered the character of Willard, played by Martin Sheen, being this upright force of sanity in the movie that goes downriver and then himself becomes more and more like Kurtz, like this buttoned up officer. You always see it in the movie, right? You got the guy that's the straight laced guy and he's going after the star colonel who's gone insane and they're going to have their clash at the end. That's not the case at all. Willard is fucked up from the beginning and that is a good thing. Another thing I noticed though on this rewatch was there's this spoon kind of in the foreground of one of the shots in Willard's room. Is he fucked up on heroin? Like, did I miss that part in all these watches that I've done?
I didn't get that. I mean, I just know he was very drunk in real life. So I think he was drinking. I don't think you could do heroin and still go out there and run these missions. Maybe out in the field, but.
Well, I meant in Saigon specifically. I don't know. I've drank a lot in my life, but I don't know if I've ever been in my tighty whities doing Tai Chi and busting mirrors.
Well, it's because you haven't been tormented by your inner demons, Gene.
I don't know. Air Force Junior ROTC, man.
Destroying a couple marriages by getting some sex phone numbers charges on it. That does not count as the same of 6 confirmed kills.
So, Big D, you talked about a lot of the tricks and effects that Coppola is using. I might be way out of line with this. Okay, I never studied cinematography. I didn't go to film school. But I noticed things in this movie as well, visually, sound-wise, that just really blew my mind. And I feel like the quality of Vittorio Storaro's cinematography really stood out. He just shoots the movie in a way that I'm not used to seeing. Lots of close-ups, lots of attention to detail. And a great example of this is early in the movie, you got this lunch scene between Willard and the general in Nha Trang. They're eating shrimp, they're eating roast beef, which is good sometimes. And you see the shrimp, the beef, the knives, the faces of the men in the room. They're all close up, the curtains, everything that you're looking at for a prolonged, almost uncomfortable amount of time, almost uncomfortably close. It's telling you a story. The movie is incredibly patient. Yes, it is long, but there's a reason for that. It is patient and it invites you to really study the image that you're looking at. But that's not to say that it's an artsy fartsy movie. It's still somehow mainstream. It's digestible. Like you get it as a dummy. And I consider myself a movie dummy. I am not cultured in these ways. Watching it, I get what they're trying to tell me with the looks that people are giving, the focusing on their hands, the reflections off the knives. It all makes sense.
Okay. So I want to believe all of these shots were intentional, but some of the research in the Hearts of Darkness, which I'll go into here, they shot everything. They just went out and shot close up, multiple cameras. There was little direction. So a lot of this stuff, I think that scene you're referencing happened during Martin Sheen's heart attack. He had a major heart attack and had to leave the set for 4 weeks. They needed to find things to shoot. That was one of them. Then they did the cut of his face, like he was at the table with them. So I don't know, because this was a passion project for some very famous directors. Orson Welles, originally, he wanted this to be his opus. He went to the studio and said, I want to do it. And they said, there's no way you can make this movie. At the time, it was financially and it was technically impossible to shoot what he wanted in the remote locations. So he went off and shot a little film called Citizen Kane. Then Francis Ford Coppola, he gets a bug up his ass that he wants to do this. He gets John Milius to write a script. They got George Lucas to direct. They were going to go shoot in South Vietnam during the war with a 16 millimeter camera, a $2 million budget. And the studio said, no, There's no way we're going to let you down there. Lucas is doing American Graffiti. He's got Star Wars. You're going to get somebody killed. And, you had Coppola said, okay, I'll go out and I'll shoot another thing I want to. He goes out and directs The Godfather 1 and 2, makes him wealthy enough that he can come back and finance this thing himself. He said, you know what? You don't have to give me the money. I'm going to do it and I'll fund everything. I'll take the risk. And it's difficult for me to separate things from Apocalypse Now, because the first time I'm watching the movie, I'm nitpicking certain things. I'm having problems with it. When you go back and watch Hearts of Darkness, I appreciate how much I learned to just the story behind it. This movie should not exist. Coppola confesses in the opening. He said, we went into the jungle. There were too many of us. We had too much money, too much equipment. And little by little, we went insane. And the document shows how the movie and the making of it paralleled kind of the war itself. It was just a waste and an overabundance of resources and manpower. And they were just overwhelmed by the jungle. You had, Sheen having a heart attack. Everybody was doing drugs. Lance was dropping acid during the Dulong Bridge scene. It was fucking chaos. And it's a miracle this movie existed.
Big D, I admittedly groaned when you told me you watched the documentary because I was afraid that this podcast would be covering the documentary instead of the movie itself. I just got to ask, you shit on Raj for reading Reddit before covering TV. How is this different? Like, don't you feel that the documentary is going to skew your view of the film? Don't you think you're and skew this podcast toward talking about the documentary rather than the movie itself?
No, I think if anything, it gives me more appreciation for it. The difficulties that went into the shoot. I didn't know that Harvey Keitel was originally Willard. They shot 2 weeks with him and then had to dump him like they did Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future to get him. I didn't know that the U.S. government wouldn't support the film, so they had to go sign a deal with the Philippine government, with Marcos, to give them all of their aerial assets, and that as they were shooting scenes, much like Tropic Thunder, the helicopters would get called off to really go shoot and kill local guerrillas right off set. I didn't know that a typhoon destroyed most of the sets, and they had to send the cast and crew home for 2 months. Sheen's heart attack. You talk about that opening scene with Sheen in the hotel room. They got his ass blackout drunk. And Coppola's there like, think of your family. Think of your family. And Sheen is too close to the mirror. He punches it, cuts his hand open. And they're like, get the nurse on scene. Get the nurse here. And he's like, no. And he's smearing the blood on his face. That shit was a real mental breakdown. I never would have known this shit unless I watched it.
Willard joins a U.S. Navy river patrol boat commanded by Chief Petty Officer Phillips with crewmen Lance, Chef, and Mr. Clean to quietly navigate to Kurtz's outpost. Before reaching the coastal mouth of the river, they rendezvous with an air assault unit commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Bill Kilgore. Kilgore is initially uncooperative but becomes more engaged after discovering that Lance is a well-known surfer. The helicopter squadron, playing Ride of the Valkyries on loudspeakers, raids a beach at dawn with a napalm strike. Before Kilgore can lure Lance out to surf on the newly conquered beach, Willard gathers the sailors to the patrol boat to continue their mission. Big D, we praised Full Metal Jacket for Stanley Kubrick's ability to dynamically move the camera through that scene where the tanks are assaulting the town in Vietnam. How did they make England look like Vietnam? How did they make it look so real? That scene feels like a flimsy soundstage compared to the gorgeous choreography we're getting in Apocalypse Now. I lost count of all the amphibious assault vehicles, tanks, real helicopters moving around on screen while people are hustling back and forth. There's people tending to the wounded, corralling suspects, burning the village. It's absolute chaos, but it somehow comes together on screen. And I imagine this cost a fortune and took some serious talent to coordinate.
Dude, it looks like chaos because it was chaos. They look like real gunships because they were gunships. They wanted to make the villages and the sets look like they'd been in battles. So they had the helicopters strafe the sets. So all the bullet holes were real. And the problem they had, though, was that each day, the pilots they were getting were different pilots who had not gone through all the run-throughs. So it was fucking chaos, dude. It was absolutely ridiculous. And it makes me, that's why I know you're thinking, don't let it affect my view of it. But they were bogged down in the mud. They were fucking in it. And that's why this movie seems so different and seems so great. And you have to remember, the Vietnam War had just ended in 1975. So it was a fresh wound for the American psyche. We talk about it that Rambo First Blood is the first time that they really started to address it. at this time, we were used to being the fucking biggest, baddest, swinging dick on the block. This was the first time we'd gotten our nose bloody. We'd lost a conflict. Apocalypse Now comes out, and people are like, what the fuck is this? You got crazy shit going on. This isn't a war movie. We were used to John Wayne as a Green Beret or The Longest Day or The Dirty Dozen, where you'd get the old good-looking Hollywood stars to go out there and save the world from the Nazis or go out there and fucking be heroes. This is a different depiction. You got guys surfing. You got the air cab assault on the beach. They're water skiing behind a patrol boat. There's fucking Playboy bunnies. There's drugs in the troops. They're murdering civilians. It's general chaos. And these are all mostly inspired by true stories, you know? But in 1979, people must have been like, what is this? I can't believe what I'm seeing on screen.
Not just 1979, right now. I mean, It was personally effective. I had such a weird feeling during the Ride of the Valkyries scene. Kilgore's, air assault team, they're going to massacre a village in order to clear the beach for surfing. They're going to kill people so they can surf. Yes, they know that there's heavy VC activity. It's quote unquote real hairy there, but they also know that there are people, there are school children. They're just innocent people trying to live their lives. It is inhumane. It is arrogant. It is immature. And at the same time, I am an American. Those are our helicopters, our soldiers. It's the might of the American war machine, able to impose its will because of our industrial prowess, our bloodthirsty culture, and our economic superiority. And guys, I am not saying that from a position of shame. I'm saying we're fucking Americans. Like, that is what we're capable of. That's why people fear us. And it's such a weird feeling because I know we're the baddies. Like, I know we're the bad guys here, but I'm also embarrassingly proud of us. And I'm like, fuck, I really hope Big D backs me up on this, because otherwise something is like, I might be a sociopath here.
Gene, I loved it. For me, it is one of the best pairings of music to a scene in movie history, at least what we've done. It's not predictable. You would not pair these two things together. You would expect something along the lines of Born to be Wild or Paint It Black. We get some more Stones, or Bad Moon Rising. Every Vietnam movie has Creedence in it, or the Stones, or All Along the Watchtower, maybe.
Fucking Forrest Gump bullshit.
Doon, 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 doon. And the fucking ships coming in, napalm shooting it up. For Francis Ford Coppola to pair a whimsical Wagner epic with this scene of utter fucking destruction and people being shot and death, it was absolutely perfect.
Ride of the Valkyries is also the attack song for Colonel Bachner in the epic King Solomon's Mines. But Big D, you're using a lot of myopic superlative here as far as the best movie pairing of music. Did you say best?
Yeah. Best, but I meant unpredictable. It's not a traditional pairing. I think that's what I was going off of.
Yeah, I think my vote would go to either Stuck in the Middle with You and Reservoir Dogs, or Don't Stop Me Now, the jukebox scene in Shaun of the Dead, or Needle in the Hay and the Royal Tenenbaums, or Judy as a Punk and the Royal Tenenbaums, or fucking anything in a Wes Anderson movie. But the question I was asking, aside from that music though, is personally, you, as you're watching those helicopters come in, and you know that this is America coming in at dawn, and we're taking your beach. You feel how, like, on a scale of none to a lot, how much pride do you feel in your country in watching that scene?
Oh, fucking lot.
Right?
And Coppola
what the fuck is wrong with us?
Coppola on set, when he was telling everybody, he said, America does the big show with everything. So he wanted the music. Yes, I'm proud of us like that. Yes, we got our problems, but we can go out there and we can fuck shit up and we can play music and surf and go after the bunnies. Yes. Yes, America. We're very special.
Run, school children. America's coming. Well, tension rises as Chief prioritizes routine patrol objectives over Willard's. Studying Kurtz's dossier, Willard is struck by the mid-career sacrifice Kurtz made by leaving a prestigious Pentagon assignment to join Special Forces. At a remote U.S. Army outpost, Willard receives a dispatch bag containing official and personal mail. Unable to find any commanding officer, Willard orders the chief to continue. He learns via dispatch that another operative, Special Forces Captain Richard Colby, was sent on an earlier mission identical to Willard's and has since joined Kurtz.
Okay, so I know I've been glowing over this movie. I've been ashing like it was Grease 2. I'm just everything in this movie has been great so far. But there is a downside to the problems I've talked about: the multiple stops and shooting, the disturbances, the difficult shooting locations. The local crew, Gene, they were paying them like $1 a day. So there was not a skilled crew out there. They built these sets. They were having troubles. There was constant rewrites. There's famously wasn't an ending to the movie until the final week of shooting. A lot of the dialogue is improvised. There was almost no continuous theme or plot line that flows from the beginning to the end. To me, it feels disjointed. The movie often seems like a series of different stops along the boat journey. And going back to my DVD option screen, when I hit my chapter search, it just hit me because it's like, okay, different stops along the journey. Here we go. Let's have combat surfing, a tiger attack while looking for a mango tree, Playboy Bunnies, USO show, river massacre, the Dulong Bridge. Gene, this movie violates all of the rules that you talked about recently, Trey Parker's basic script writing rules. Everything within a plot should be, this happens, therefore this happens. It should never be, oh, well, there's a tiger that attacks them because they're looking for a mango tree. And then they stumble upon a USO show. And then they massacre some guys on a boat. This is violating the rules that you were so strongly backing recently.
I know this is going to make me sound like an Apocalypse Now apologist, and this is the biggest cop-out that people will ever throw at you when you make an argument of something not making sense. Can't believe I'm saying this. It's not supposed to make sense. So I've seen this criticism from a lot of Apocalypse Now naysayers online, and the thing is, much like Joseph Conrad's novel, Heart of Darkness, it's the symbolism of the event more than the logic of it, and things are not supposed to be strung together logically. The whole idea is there's increasing insanity the deeper into the jungle Willard goes. And so it's supposed to make less and less sense. Every time you come around a bend in the river, the thing you're about to see should make no sense at all. And it really mirrors the spirit of Heart of Darkness without adhering strictly to the events in the 1899 novel. And I want to talk about that for a second, because you got movies like Beowulf, right? Where they're like, hey, we're going to take the premise of Beowulf, we're going to change it completely. We're going to put Christopher Lambert out there. We're going to make it post-apocalyptic. And it's going to have barely anything to do with Beowulf, the original story. Heart of Darkness does that, but gets the spirit really close to the novel. Every time the patrol boat's crew would encounter something on the river, you had to stop and ask, is this really happening? Are guys really surfing in mortar fire? Is there a riverbank stage set up for Playboy playmates? Why is a naked man running in the rain with another soldier's clothing? And the whole idea, much like the events in Event Horizon, is that it's just supposed to get weirder and weirder. And the key to making things weirder is that they can't logically follow something else and make sense. Otherwise, they wouldn't be that weird.
Again, I got to think that's a byproduct of the challenges of the personal Vietnam this crew was facing. Because, April talks about the plantation scene. This was a huge set piece. They built the plantation house. They flew in genuine French actors. They had all of the table rules for French culture to make sure that the wine was served as the temperature. It was this giant set piece. He just didn't like it, cut it out. So there was a path that this would take. And I think that explains why there's 3 or 4 versions, if you take the fact that the original showing was different than the theatrical, is he never quite got the mix right to the way he loved it. That's why he continued to work on it. But I mean, I'm okay with it. I like the fact that you said, and that's what it makes me appreciate this movie more, is that yes, it embodies the chaos. It may not have been intentional, but you start feeling like, what the fuck is going on? All the smoke, what's going on?
But it does follow along that line of the novel. Things just don't make sense. I mean, in the novel, Kurtz has a court jester. He has a harlequin that just it's a guy dressed up like a clown. Why would you have that in the Congo in 1899? It doesn't make any sense, but it's not supposed to make sense. Everybody's supposed to be crazy. It's an Alice in Wonderland kind of story.
So I also never knew, and I don't know enough. I mean, I'm not a great fan of reading. I think you're the literary expert. I'll read very simple things with pictures, color books. But Milius also said, besides Heart of Darkness, that this was based on Homer's Odyssey. Did you see this?
Yeah, that I don't know. I think I read Homer's Odyssey once, and I was like, it's okay. It's like when people say the Bible's the best storybook. I'm like, is it really?
So people out there, Willard is apparently Odysseus, Kilgore is the Cyclops, and the bunnies are the sirens.
Oh, jeez.
Again, it's artsy. It's artsy, Gene.
I got a different theory on the bunnies. It was just showing a truth of life for men, because aside from the truths about humanity, war, hypocrisy, power, Apocalypse Now does explore some mini truths along the way. And one of those is the playmate scene, right? So Willard, he trades fuel for a few hours with these Playboy bunnies. And Big D, we've all been there. Like, you're lusting after this woman at the club or at the bar. You see some hot lady, and you're like, God, just to be alone with her. You finally get to be alone with her. And she always wants to talk. Like, the hottest ones, they always want to talk about their cat or their kids or their mental problems. And like, listen, we're not uncaring people. Like, I think I'm a caring person, but it completely puts you in this odd position. It's late at night. You're at their house maybe. And you either have to put all that aside, like the guys do. I'm a bird, put all that aside and try to fuck, even if she's telling you some really disturbing shit. Be like, okay, yeah, cool, baby. Yeah, that's all right. Take your clothes off. Or you got to bail. It's like, hey, sorry, I got to go. Or you spend a few hours listening to rambling. And this is why I don't do OnlyFans, because this shit invariably happens. Like, you'll sign up, pay $6 a month to see some lady naked, and she just keeps wanting to talk about her cat.
But they weren't surprised. They put the moat there for a reason. They knew these soldiers were going to have to swim across the river to go after these girls. Make the moat bigger. It's again, Gene, it's one we can't help ourselves. We can't. We haven't evolved that much. We're very close to our primitive roots. And I've also never gone on OnlyFans.
Never, ever?
Never, ever. No.
I know what to get you for your birthday.
Is there like a premium like subscription or something? I'm always afraid it's going to be some of that bullshit like that Ashley Madison hack where it's going to come up like, oh, guess who had an account?
Yeah, but I would have the account and then just give you the login. That way it's not traceable to you. Is it actually... Is it worth it? Like, what's different than the stuff on like Pornhub or YouPorn? So I think the difference is that most of the people are like amateurs, I guess, or whatever. And it's like you can find the person that you like, and then you just get their content immediately. That, I think that's the key right there. So the key is like on Pornhub or something, right? You're searching for an actress, and then you can see what's available from her video catalog, right? In the OnlyFans model, you subscribe to that person, and then they're putting stuff out like every day or every few days. So you're just getting their feed of what they created, right? And to varying degrees of, like, it's not all hardcore and it's not all softcore. It's like they got all kinds of, they range from hangouts to a softcore to a hardcore sort of thing. But yeah, I think King B and I were going to put some money together and get you a OnlyFans account for your birthday. Can I make requests? Is this like customized to my likes? Of course. So there's like cheers from Twitch. I can cheers to get. You could send them. Well, they'll often message you and say, "Hey." We're spending way too much time on. Oh, it's interesting. But no, yeah, you message you and say, "Hey, I got this video. It's $10. You buy it, or you can tip for posts." But anyway. So yeah, we're gonna find you. We're gonna find you something special. We're gonna find you somebody just like Miss December, Playmate of the Year. Gene, Shat the Movies needs to be on OnlyFans. Oh, Jesus Christ! No, I only post my underwear photos on Discord. Everybody, we could have a Shat hot guy calendar, like King B dress up as a fireman, you on a motorcycle with chaps. What are you doing? I could be doing the rope course, and the rope jumping out of an airplane. No, I'd be doing like climbing a rope, and it would be perfectly placed, like Austin Powers, so you wouldn't see anything. Yeah. Moving right along, Lance activates a smoke grenade after dropping acid, attracting enemy fire and causing Mr. Clean's death. Further upriver, Chief is impaled by a spear thrown by the Montagnards, and Willard reveals his mission to Chef, who's now in charge of the boat. The patrol boat arrives at Kurtz's outpost, an abandoned temple teeming with Montagnards and remains of victims. Willard, Chef, and Lance encounter Colby and an American photojournalist who praises Kurtz's genius. Willard sets out with Lance to find Kurtz, leaving Chef with orders to call in an airstrike on the outpost if the two do not return. So earlier in the movie, there's a scene where Chief has the patrol boat pull over this sampan, and Willard's like, nah, don't do it. We've got an important mission. We don't have to do this. But, these are Navy guys running a patrol boat, and Chief is adamant that they do it. It's a bit of a power struggle. Mr. Clean, he loses his shit. This woman moves to save her hidden puppy while Chef is searching the ship. And Clean he just fucking hoses the whole boat with the 60 caliber machine gun. And so you're thinking, fuck this guy. He's a 17-year-old hotshot. And granted, it's Chief's fault for ordering his crew to search the ship. You knew shit was they were all strung pretty tight. They didn't really need to do that. So you're down on Mr. Clean. You're thinking he's an asshole. And Coppola, he's like, hold on there, viewer. And he gives us this heartbreaking scene. I mean, it's just masterful filmmaking. Clean is fatally shot further downriver while he's listening to an audio tape that his mother recorded for him, right? That's been delivered by mail. And his dead body is there. They're mourning him. And this tape just continues playing over his dead body with all his mom's hopes for grandchildren. And this sweet woman's voice is delivering an unplanned eulogy for her son, completely unaware that the boy is dead. It's really the first look that the movie takes at the American cost of death, and the fact that we could do these inhumane things, be these awful people, and yet still the deaths of these kids was sad. It changes your heart real quick.
How old do you think Lawrence Fishburne was?
How old was the character or the actor?
The actor at this point.
20?
He was 14.
Fuck you.
Yes, he was 14
Great job,
years old.
Lawrence Fishburne. What a talent. He's going to grow up to be somebody.
I think he will. He might become
Bright
famous.
future for this kid.
Possibly. But I agree. That whole crew is great. Chief is great. It all rang true to me. And the way that, discipline breaks down happens. One of the other platoons in my company, they had a squad go out in Iraq in the beginning of the Gulf War, the second one. They went off the rails. They started drinking. They started blowing shit up. They started commandeering vehicles. This shit happens. And you can feel the fibers of discipline being stretched where you have Chief is pulling, hey, this is my job. I got to do this. You got Willard saying, hey, we got to go up range. These guys are all getting high. It's slowly starting to disintegrate, the fabric of discipline and reality. So to me, it seemed really true. And I can only imagine Vietnam being in the jungle. I've read the stories, but that's a totally different beast.
I got to say, if I'm the chief in charge of a patrol boat, I'm drawing the line at guys dropping acid and like painting their bodies. I'm like, Lance, look, we're turning the fuck around. We got to take Lance back. Lance is done here. Drop him off with the Playboy bunnies. He's not going anywhere.
It's probably a smart move.
In the camp, Willard is bound and brought before Kurtz, where Chef's severed head is placed in Willard's lap. Kurtz releases Willard and lectures him on his theories of war, praising the ruthlessness of the Viet Cong. Kurtz discusses his family and asks that Willard tell his son about him after his death. That night, as the Montagnards ceremonially kill a water buffalo, Willard kills Kurtz with a machete. All in the compound see Willard departing, carrying a collection of Kurtz's writings, and bow down to him. Willard gathers Lance, boards the patrol boat, and heads back downriver. I understand at this point in the movie that Kurtz didn't care if he lived or he died. Like, his nihilism had reached that point. He is gone off the deep end, right? I understand the symbolism of his death in this film coinciding with the sacrifice of the water buffalo. I get all of that. I get what they're doing here. What I don't understand is how they filmed it, how they chose to film it, the technical aspects of what they decided to show and how they decided to show it. The rest of the movie felt like patiently crafted art, right? They took their time. It looked beautiful. Willard killing Kurtz, it felt rushed. It felt flat. And this is the end of the movie. This is supposed to be the climax. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a gratuitously bloody scene, nor was it particularly dramatic, not a great bit of acting, nor was it interestingly shot. And if Coppola's point was Kurtz is a nihilist and therefore his death is nothing remarkable, okay, sure, I can go with that. But if you're going to do that, then why did they bother having Martin Sheen come out of the steaming water? Why place this moment of nihilism at the climax of the movie? And I have to ask Big D, were you as let down by this scene as I was?
Yeah, I was disappointed upon my first viewing. And I think even as a younger kid, I didn't understand what was going on. But after watching again, Hearts of Darkness, I think it was a result of what was going on. I think this was not intentional. This was not always the original design. John Milius, when he first wrote this for the original 16 millimeter attempt, Hearts of Darkness was a dark comedy. Okay, so we already know what a legendary madman Milius was. He is the real life inspiration for what's his name in The Big Lebowski? For Walter, you know, and the ending of this movie became the hardest part for Coppola to finish. Milius, he does one thing, over-the-top action, crazy shit really well. He loves it.
Avenge me!
Yes, in his original ending, Willard and Kurtz, they come together. They're fighting back to back to defeat the VC. There's an air attack. They shoot down a helicopter. It is this heroic moment. And Coppola's like, I don't want that. I don't want a typical heroic action scene at the end of the movie. It should be death. It should be something that's somber, something that makes you think. So he had to rewrite the ending here. He goes out and gets to Brando and says, can you please readjust your 3 weeks of shooting? Brando refuses to. He says, I don't have the finale done. I don't have the ending. He shows up on set. He is a fat bastard. He had contractually agreed to lose weight. He shows up sloppy, sweaty, and just ill prepared for it. So the best that they could do, and they show this in the documentary team, Brando's sitting there without knowing the background material. He's like, why are they in a boat going upriver? What are they doing here? So he had him sitting in the dark so you couldn't see his bloated shape because he's supposed to be this legendary warrior, spouting just nonsense and reading poetry until the end that he could splice pieces together, show it in the dark, make it mysterious, make it that you don't know what's going on. And then you're left with that desperate shot, walking out, putting the weapons down, and it's kind of out there. And again, when they originally showed this in the theater, there was no ending credits. It just came up, directed, produced, and they handed out these little brochures that went into the making of the film, what was going on, what was the intention. So I think in the end that this was the best they could have done. This was a dream ending.
Big D, what year did the documentary Hearts of Darkness come out? You have to look it up. I'll tell you.
I believe it was 91.
1991, yes.
Yeah.
So it's been a few years since then. And in 2014, the Huffington Post looked back on Marlon Brando a decade after his death in 2004. And they had access to Brando's library, which was opened up after he died. Extensive library, audio recordings, letters, books. And they just poked all kinds of holes in Coppola's narrative about what went wrong in this movie. First of all, you call him a fat bastard. Okay. Brando showed up. He's 5'9", 210 pounds. Like, that's slimmer than the King Bee. That is not a morbidly obese. He's overweight for sure. And yeah, you said he was contractually obligated. Yeah, we want to see a very fit special forces guy. I get it. He was fatter than he was supposed to be. But 210 at 5'9", that is not, he's not corpulent. He's chonky.
Was this, I want to know, who did the weighing? Is this Brando's account?
Well, yeah. But,
I don't trust
beyond
the man.
Beyond that, they have letters between Brando and Coppola, audio recordings of the two of them discussing the film's conception on a houseboat while the filming was suspended. Brando's got his personal script. He's got his notes on there and the many books that he read and annotated for the film. And here's the crazy part. He was not only prepared for the production, but he also contributed ideas and script revisions that shaped the film. He had a 4,000 book library with several editions of Heart of Darkness. So fuck that notion that he didn't know why the boat's going upriver. He was the one who had the idea to shave his head to look like Kurtz. Like, this man was just an easy target because Coppola knew that he wouldn't hit back.
Jesus Christ. So you're taking his own word, his library.
No, there are letters and audio recordings
that he wrote to other people
of him and Coppola writing to each other.
Coppola was probably scared shitless. I'm going to lose my star. He's okay. What is Brando's reputation in Hollywood?
He's very difficult to work with.
So you think in this one he was a hero, that none of this could be true?
No, he was difficult to work with because he was so exacting. This was the man who would show up. This was like what he was notorious for doing, right? He would show up to a set and he would phone it in. The first scene that he shot, he'd phone it in. And if the director didn't come and fucking chew out his ass for it, he would just phone it in for the rest of the movie because he wasn't interested in working with that director. You had to come at him and tell him his performance was shit so he knew you were a serious director. That's the kind of guy he was.
Have you seen The Island of Dr. Moreau?
Yes.
You think Brando did the same thing there?
Fuck, I mean, it's been a long time since I saw it. I don't really recall.
He's walking around with that bathrobe and the things around his head.
Come on, he was like super fat then.
But he decided to have the mini-me, which is actually
pretty good.
What mini-me was based on. Yeah. I tend, because here, this was all on-set recordings as well. Phone calls between Brando, the agent, between Coppola, the studio. He actually threatened to cut him and to go out and get Pacino, De Niro, somebody else. So I don't buy it.
So your logic here is that Marlon Brando fabricated letters and audio tapes and then hid them in his own library to be discovered after his death. That was his defense against Coppola.
No, I think his
It's
estate.
not like he provided these to the press. The man died with everyone thinking that he was a fat piece of unprepared shit that almost ruined Apocalypse Now, when he was just quietly like, fuck.
I think his estate was nitpicking. They were picking out the selective facts. I want to see also, what did his rider say? 15 sides of beef, 1 plate of assorted cheeses.
Wow. Guy loses 100 pounds and he just turns on his own kind.
If it was my profession, if it was my job. Listen, I'm not fat shaming him, but you got a responsibility.
Absolutely are.
No,
15 sides of beef.
Your responsibility is, if you're an athlete, is to be ready to play. He wasn't ready to play, and there was no reason for it. So I think the ending, Gene, I'm good with it. It leaves a little open-ended. We don't know exactly what happened. Did he call in the raid? Did they blow the village up like the handwritten note in the manuscript suggests? Hey, blow them all up. Did he do it? We don't know. And I think that's better than back-to-back fucking video games, shooting down a helicopter, high-fiving an arm wrestle in America. Fuck yeah. So yeah, I'm good with it.
I'd pay $20 to see that ending, though. Just if they added it onto the DVD.
See Brando out there. America, fuck yeah.
April's dad just walks out.
Yeah.
Well, now's the time when we give our Shat score for Apocalypse Now. The Shat score is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie takes to get off your respective butts. 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It's when you don't know if you're an animal or a god, but you are both. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster movie, is when someone steals your surfboard and it was a good board and you liked it. I'll go first. I'm going to go with half a wipe for this one. The cast is stacked. The film is a brilliant adaptation of a genius novella, and it is gorgeously shot. This is one of those must-watch before you die movies. If you have not seen it, watch it immediately. And it goes into that final 30 minutes pretty strong, but much like the Eliot poem, The Hollow Men, Apocalypse Now ends not with a bang, but a whimper. I found myself losing interest just as Marlon Brando was delivering his big scenes, and that is not a knock on Brando. It just felt like the crew was ready to go home while he was just getting warmed up. So for me, half a wipe.
If you watch the behind the scenes stuff, Gene, he looks a bit like Steven Seagal. Like now, here he wears those big bathrobes.
Yeah.
And he does those fake roundhouse kicks and people fly out of the way. Like, it's whatever. I'll get over it. The film.
Steven Seagal's 6'3".
Where are you getting all these stats?
Because I looked it up. I was like, was Marlon Brando at Apocalypse Now fatter than Steven Seagal?
That's great.
I swear to God I did, because of the outfits. And no, Steven Seagal's 6'3", man.
Yeah,
How did he get him in a submarine?
Yeah, he's got to be at least 3.
Oh, wait, he was in a
340 now.
Yeah, he was.
Yes, he was. Oh no, he was on an aircraft carrier.
How did they even fit him in an aircraft carrier?
You burning my soup. Don't burn my soup.
Get my pies out of the oven.
Get my pies out of the oven. So, Gene, for me, it's a tough one. I feel like the dedication that Coppola had to making this film, the cast, the adventure that they went on, the parallels, whether they were intentional or not, it is a beautiful film. And when I saw that this did not win, it was up for Best Director, Best Actor, and it lost to Kramer versus Kramer. I'm like, this is a travesty. This is absolutely terrible. No, Gene, it won the 2 Academy Awards it deserved. Sound and cinematography. It is beautiful. It is wallpaper on your computer. Gorgeous. Back in the day, the setup, the frames, you could just sit there. It is an amazing film. I think the cast is great. A lot of it's improvised. A lot of it felt natural and organic. The entire air cavalry scenes are just something to behold, to sit back and watch in surround sound. Is it a perfect film? No. I think it's probably a 0.75 wipe. I think it is a bit sloppy, and Coppola going back and trying to fix it multiple times with all of these different revisions and cuts shows he's not even happy with the finished product. So I think in there, maybe there is a perfect film. We haven't gotten there yet. Maybe in 10 years, Coppola's, estate will come out with the final family version where they go back and edit it or whatever. But for me, 0.75 wipes. It's great. You got to see this film.
All right, that's 3/4 of a wipe from Big D and half a wipe from me. That gives us an average wipe score of 0.625 wipes for Apocalypse Now.
Gene, that now ties this in the 27 spot. It is slightly better than Die Hard, Groundhog's Day, Good Will Hunting, and The Fugitive, and slightly worse than American Beauty, The Truman Show, Full Metal Jacket, I don't know about that, and Goodfellas.
Yeah, Full Metal Jacket. I feel like this movie is so much more mature than Full Metal Jacket. Full Metal Jacket feels like, but it also suffers from the fact that they intentionally made that boot camp scene, goofy and funny.
And I think also what brought it down and made it a higher ranking film is that we had a third vote. So I gave it a 0.5, you gave it a 0.5, and Ash gave it a 0.75. So the three of us, I think this is on par. I think they're really close, and they're both memorable. They're the two most memorable Vietnam movies. I mean, other than maybe. I'm
sorry. Did you just simultaneously say that this movie is on par with Full Metal Jacket, but you gave it a lower score than Full Metal Jacket?
No, I was saying overall. I'm an imperfect human, Gene. I need you to balance me out.
Do you think that Full Metal Jacket is a superior film to Apocalypse Now?
I don't know. My brain it's mush from all of this. I feel like I've been in the jungle. I think they're both. I think the storytelling and the character development of that and the message was clear and impactful, and it's devastating. This is a meandering, just wild psychedelic trip through the jungle. They're very different. I left that feeling like I wanted to kill myself. I left this like, what just happened to me? I've went on a trip. So very different. It's hard for me to compare the two.
Yeah, Full Metal Jacket definitely had the better ending.
Definitely.
All right. Well, April, I hope we did the movie justice. And we really, really appreciate the opportunity to cover one of the greatest films ever made in American cinema. Big D, I know we're coming up on time, but if we can squeeze in a couple voicemails, that'd be great. Our first one comes from Gary in Ireland.
Hey guys, Gary here from Ireland. First time to contact yous. I'm just after sending you all a message today around your fantasy football for the Premier League coming up on Discord, which of course I can't get linked to, but that's a whole other story, which I'm sure by the time you hear this message we'll have resolved. Really enjoy the podcast, guys. I first discovered you while searching for a podcast around my favorite movie of all time, which is 1987's classic RoboCop. Liked your review, think it was pretty much spot on. And I suppose the big question I would have, not that it is a favorite movie of mine because it most certainly isn't, is RoboCop 2 one if it was commissioned that you would do? Much more mean-spirited, and I know that sounds ridiculous when talking about a RoboCop movie, not half the picture that Robo 1 was, but probably a 2.5, 3.5 wipe movie. The kid will get an extra wipe straight away. So if I were to commission it, it's to see if you would actually review it. And just to say again, guys, really appreciate the podcast. Love the work that you do. Just a shout out to Ash as well. I hope everything is going well for herself. I think she was a very worthy addition to the pod and did bring another element to it as well. Did like Roger. I find him quite entertaining, but I think Ash has brought something else there too. And not to tell you what way to go with it, guys, but I don't think it'd be any harm if you actually just said at the start of the pod if you had any word from Ash or if there was any update on it, just to keep us in the know. We're worried about y'all. Well, listen, I know I'll die if this one actually meets the podcast or releases on the pod at some point, but love what you do. Keep up the good work. And Gene, getting married, now that's a trip. Best thing I ever did in my life, buddy. I hope it works out for you too. Cheers, guys. Hear from you all soon.
So I often forget that people don't listen necessarily to every episode. So like we dealt with the Roger episode in Three Amigos. There are some people who might not have listened to that. We talked about Ash a couple weeks back saying, you got kids, you got a spouse, you got a house, you got, the things come up. So Ash has not officially left. Ash has just taken some time. And I even reached out and tried to get her in for Hackers because she loved that film and it would have been great to have her input for it. But she unfortunately responded late. She hadn't watched it, so she couldn't come back. So that's the story. Hopefully one day she comes back. Maybe we'll have to do Grease because she fucking hates that movie. If I told her we were doing Grease, she would be like obligated to take her sword out of the stone and to climb the mountain to fucking just come up there. She would have to slay that beast.
Gary, thank you so much for your voicemail. I didn't realize until your voicemail that you really haven't lived until you've heard an Irishman say RoboCop. It's a beautiful way to say RoboCop. Also, a lot of things coming together in this voicemail. You're talking about the wedding, talking about RoboCop. So Big D and I will be in Detroit for my wedding in September, and we will be having the rehearsal dinner in Eastern Market, which is where the RoboCop statue is. So maybe even if we don't do RoboCop 2, which we'd love to do for you. So I think, it's a yes on that commission, 100%. But also as a teaser for you, maybe we can run over to the RoboCop statue and take a picture together and post it up on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for you there, Gary.
Oh my God, it's like a pilgrimage, Gene.
Yeah.
Your wedding will be great too, but to go see and stand before the one and only, the symbol of justice in New Detroit, bow to RoboCop.
Clarence Boddicker is bugging me. Thanks, Gary. Next up, we have a voicemail from John from Spring Hill.
Shat crew. John from Spring Hill here. On your Speed episode, Big D said that people sometimes complain or don't want to hear you guys talk about your personal lives during the podcast and you should stick to the movie. Well, I want you to let them know that's the whole point of a podcast, is to get to know the people doing the podcast, reviewing something that they have an interest in. So for Big D, you tell them, don't shit on Shat. If they got a problem with it, go somewhere else. And Gene, for you, you're a martial arts enthusiast, so I figured this would be up your alley. In MMA, there's a fighter by the name of Kazushi Sakuraba that fought Hoist Gracie for 90 minutes and beat him. His entrance song? The Speed theme song. Mind blown. P.S. Ash, we miss you.
John, thank you so much for that fact. It is true, under a special set of rules, that Hoist Gracie fight did go 90 minutes, which is absolutely bonkers. But I did not know that there was a connection to the Speed theme song. Also, John, thank you so much for your don't shit on Shat position. Listen, we can take shit. It's totally fine. But I do agree with you that without our personal anecdotes, without our conversation about OnlyFans on this episode, it's basically two guys talking about movies that came out 40 years ago and telling you, I don't know whether they're good or not. I don't know if that's a very entertaining podcast.
No, and I don't get that anyone doing a movie podcast is qualified to critique some of these films' cinematography or what they were doing in the shot and who's upshot and downshot and the way they light it. That's all bullshit. Unless it's a behind the scenes with the actual director, the cast. Everyone is just blowing smoke up their own ass. That's not what we are. I know this when I talked about behind the scenes shit, but it was more to appreciate what was going on. So thank you for listening to our stories. And that's why we do it. I like to hear the stories about Gene, that I know that his aunt once tried to touch his private area, and that in Farsi it's a patcha, right?
Patcha.
Yeah. See, how else would I know that? I wouldn't.
Also, shout out to Kevin Brackett and Dana Buckler, two guys who are much more qualified than we are to tell you about whether a film is good or not. They joined our Discord this week, and it's been super cool to have them on there. I was honored. It was like film podcast royalty showed up. But yeah, if you're listening for a skilled critique of film, I don't know if we're the right podcast. But if you enjoy hearing it from us, I think one of the best compliments I ever got was when I asked, why would we do Game of Thrones? I said, there's so many Game of Thrones podcasts out there. Why should we do one? We're not experts at Game of Thrones. And the response that we got was, it's because people want to hang out with us and talk about Game of Thrones. And that's what makes a difference. So we appreciate you all listening.
And that's an honor. And a tip for the future, if you want to find an educational podcast about any subject, don't pick one with Shat in the name. That kind of disqualifies us right off the bat. Gene, next week, the hits keep rolling, the commissions keep going, and I'm very excited for this film. I thought in my new psychedelic state that we had done it. I almost believed we had done this film, and we've not. Navy Lieutenant Tom Farrell meets a young woman, Susan Atwell, and they share a passionate fling. Farrell then finds out that his superior Defense Secretary David Bryce is also romantically involved with Atwell. When the young woman turns up dead, Farrell is put in charge of the murder investigation. He begins to uncover shocking clues about the case, but when details of his encounter with Susan surface, he becomes a suspect as well. Commissioned by Joshua G. And serendipitously, Gene, this film also came out almost on my 14th birthday, just short of it. So we got that going for us. I remember this film very fondly, and I think it was a good one.
Well, I watched it on my flight back from Detroit. Very excited to discuss it with you. And thank you, Joshua, for commissioning the film. Thank you, April, for commissioning Apocalypse Now. And thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible. That concludes this week's episode of Shat at the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media, share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. You can email us, host@shatpod.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or by commissioning your own movie. Find all the information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV. Review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all the information on our website, shatpod.com/TV, wherever fine podcasts be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. It helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-host, Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Join us next week for the following movie.
They needed a hero.
I understand he has a background in intelligence.
Has 2 tours with naval intelligence.
Get him here.
He liked excitement.
Take us somewhere.
He wanted her. Their passion upset the balance of power.
What's all this top secret business I've been hearing about over the Pentagon?
You know I work for Bryce?
Then that makes 2 of us.
This one can do things for me like no other woman I've ever met.
Behind the cover-up.
Try and understand.
The power.
The important thing is to abort an investigation before it ever gets to you.
You haven't told me everything.
Who's running this thing at the Pentagon?
The new boy, Farrell.
So we can take the fall in case anything goes wrong.
The loyalty.
I love you. I promise I'll work everything out.
How did you actually meet the Secretary of Defense?
I need a car. It's an emergency.
These people have already tried to kill one person who knew.
Bring this one down.
No, you can't take that.
Behind the deceit.
If it were your intention to bring down David Bryce, then I'd have no choice but to make sure that you didn't get away with it.
They mean to kill me, Sam.
Because of the truth, there's no way out. Kevin Costner, Gene Hackman, Sean Young, Will Patton, No Way Out.